Some of you guys have been on some of these calls with me before and know that we have a disclaimer with UBET Firewise. Anything that we talk about is to help us be safer, but there's no guarantees either that you or your home will survive by taking these actions. And especially for tonight, the critical disclaimer is that the only sure way to survive is to evacuate. And as you'll see as we develop this evening, the only way to guarantee survival is to evacuate early. I'm super impressed with all of you guys who've signed up for this and starting to participate in some of these sessions, because I'm learning as I go and knowing, each time I learn something new, I do more preparedness in that arena. So hopefully tonight will help each of you and all of us come together and be a little bit more prepared for what might face us. Our vision at UBET Firewise, as you guys know, I think we're doing a really good job of having neighbors look out for each other, and we're working toward being fire adapted, which will let us live with fire. And I think that's the goal. Fire is not going away. So as we think about UBET, this is something I've been sharing. This is our program. Sections 1 through 3 are those items that we have been focusing on for the last 7 years. We are in our 7th year of being Firewise. Home hardening is absolutely the most critical of everything, but they're all important. And we have our 4th season of our radio program, which is our emergency communication. And we launched the early warning system with the sensors this year. They've already proven helpful. And we have folks who are kind of our first responder team. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to share that with some of you who may not have been participating in some of our other sessions. And last but not least, I think I have a few signups tonight who are actually not in our UBET Firewise mailing list. So there's the QR code. If you're on already, please feel free to take your phone and take a snapshot of that and join, and you will get all the information. So there's my PSAs. As a refresher, we're going to spend a lot of time with maps tonight, but I think the important thing here is that in order to be Firewise, it's basically everyone has to come together and help wherever they can. We have a lot of opportunities for people to help, and one of the most important is all of these sections are various neighborhoods, and they each have 1 to 3 households as neighborhood leaders, and we have openings. We're constantly ebb and flowing on that, which is normal, and that's life, and that's perfect, but it would be great if you guys or somebody would be interested in helping out on the communication. And I know Anithia is late tonight, but she's one of our rock star communicators. Basically just capturing the information that flows out and sharing it with the folks in your immediate neighborhood. And also, being kind of the first line of defense to help answer questions where you can. I can't do it all. So we do have some openings, and I just highlight those in yellow and red. We're not going to spend time on it, but I just wanted to put that out there that we will be doing a campaign to seek more volunteers to help us out. And this is what it looks like. So you've got some of your stalwarts, Brad and Anithia and Kurt, and some of the younger folks like Rama and Cheyenne on there that are all part of my to be released poster. Guys just got a sneak peek on that. But getting right to it, why we're here tonight is an evacuation roundtable. I know this is a difficult conversation, and I want to acknowledge that for some of us, this is something that we haven't really thought through. I've thought through it more than I care to admit. And I feel like I've learned a lot in the 7 years I've been doing this, and I am pushing the boundaries with these conversations on Zoom, because these aren't conversations that our first responders or Office of Emergency Services wants to have. And I acknowledge that, they're concerned about 2 things. One is liability. And then the second is that if people feel they have options, that they might not leave. And as I said before, the only guarantee of survival is to leave early if you can. But with that said, I'm going to be sharing a number of scenarios and options tonight. And you'll see that in a lot of these scenarios, you've heard me say this before, hope for the best, plan for the worst. And the worst is that we cannot evacuate. So we're going to spend some time around what that looks like and where do we go and what do we do in those situations. And then obviously the UBET realities, I'll be talking a little bit about what we do have in terms of potential secondary egress for evacuation, and also the zones of last resort, some of which we covered in our shelter in place conversation last month. And last, we'll close with actions that each of us can take to prepare ourselves and our families, right? So this isn't going to be something where, you know, in the midst of a wildfire, you can figure it out, stuff you have to do in advance. So we'll cover that as well. So let's talk scenarios first. I think the thing that struck me as when fire strikes is that there are a lot more options. It's a lot more complex, you know, than just A to B. I don't know why. I guess I just always assumed to get in my car and leave, and I go down UBET to 174 and I either go right or left. But that's a super simplistic view, and I hope it's that simple. But we want to talk about a variety of scenarios so that each of you guys can also start thinking about those in terms of when the fire happens, you know, where you might need to go and what you can do about it. So for those of you who did participate in our shelter in place last month, I unveiled this visual. It was quite profound for me to do the research out of CAL FIRE, FEMA, United States Fire Administration, Australia, other countries who faced the same sorts of situations that we face. And the data supports, or the data dictates rather, what is most survivable and what is least survivable. So early evacuation is the only guarantee. Even when you evacuate, when it's mandatory, there's some risk. Then you have shelter in place, which is staying in your house, zone of last resort, which we'll talk about. But if you're en route to evacuate, you can't, it's blocked, you go there. Trapped in your vehicle and water refuge are the two worst case scenarios with very low survivability rates. The bottom, stay and defend. I put it below the line here because it's not something you can just, in the midst of a fire, decide to do. It's something that you have to spend years, months and years preparing to do that. And that's what we covered in our last presentation. So if you didn't see that and you're interested in it, please go to the UBET YouTube Firewise channel and check it out. I know most of you have. So again, you guys hear me talk a lot about worst case scenario. And for us, there's a couple scenarios around that. One of them is that there's a no notice incident. And what that means is, for us, it starts inside of the UBET boundaries, and we don't have, there's no, you know, OES or code red or anything. There's no time for it to go through the system and get formal alerts. We have to understand the situation and recognize that we are in trouble and we have to do something. So that what you do is what we're talking about. You're ready to go evacuation plan and understanding in advance what your options are, and then figuring out which one to, you know, pull the trigger on in the moment. So I talk a lot about pickleball because I play that, and I tell people in pickleball, it's a fast-paced game. There's no time to get ready when the ball's coming at you. You have to be ready. And it's the same thing here. In an evacuation with a fire, no incident or no notice fire, you can't stop and think about all of your options. You have to just act out your plan. So again, I'm probably preaching to the choir because you guys are on this call about taking responsibility. But hopefully the goal of tonight is that we'll give you some information and tools that will help you make that assessment and prepare you to better make a decision around what your actions are going to be. So again, those of you who were on our call for shelter in place, you saw this, but what this looks like here is those same scenarios that I just shared with you with the survival likelihood, a little bit more details spelled out, and then some notes in terms of requirements for each of those. And I think the call out for stay and defend and shelter in place, they typically are the ones that end up being the most kind of in the gray. There's a huge variance in survivability because a lot of it depends on your preparedness, your home, if it's hardened, and a variety of factors, right? So it could be very successful, but it could also just blow up in your face. The top two we know are your best, and then the other ones are not so great. But for tonight's purposes, we're going to focus on evacuation. And with UBET Road being what it is, that also encompasses the reality that you may have to deviate from your evacuation. You may not be able to get out of UBET. You may have to go to a zone of last resort, and or worst case scenario, other than water, is be trapped in the vehicle. So we'll talk a little bit more about each of those as we move forward. The other thing that has been really kind of eye-opening for me, I referenced this the last session as well, but I ran across this publication that's been around for a while. WUI is Wildland Urban Interface, where the forest and people kind of co-mix, right? Buildings and forest structures, that's the interface. There's this document, and it was updated in March of this year. And it's designed for communities like ours. It's designed for kind of research and recommendations around smaller communities, rural, often like ours, one way in, one way out, and sort of the options that you need to think about. I did mention, and Andrew, I know you're on the call, that I have been highlighting through that document. I think I'm on page 160 of 169. So I'm almost finished with the highlighting, and I did offer to share that out if somebody wants it, because it's quite an endeavor to go through. But the next few slides that I'm going to share, a lot of this is directly from this document. And NIST is the National Institute for Standards and Technology. And so this is, again, something that is compiling best practices from all agencies and across the globe. So when they talk about evacuation, they have 5 different scenarios and options that you need to plan for, listed as E1 through 5. That's evacuation 1 through evacuation 5. Obviously, evacuation 5 is the best scenario. It means you got out safely. And then the first 4 are kind of what you need to be thinking about. I'll do a little bit of a deep dive into a description on those. So the first one is you stay at home, either because you believe it's safer than trying to leave, and or you run out of time. So that is something that you can make that call in advance. We, like I said, talked about it in depth last discussion around the preparation for that, that even though you might make that a game day call, it's still something you should be preparing for. But if you are looking to evacuate, the reality is that, they call it entrapment. And I guess, it happens a lot. People can't get to their destination. We all saw what happened in Paradise with the campfire. A lot of people were trying to evacuate and they couldn't. The roads were blocked. They were being rerouted. Pictures, the photographs are just heartrending when you look at all the vehicles burned up and, visualizing people abandoning it and trying to run. So entrapped on the way out or on your way to a zone of last resort, either one of those is a horrible feeling. The safety zone in advance is part of their process. We don't have any. We don't technically have any safety zones. The criteria for those are extreme. It's like almost, it's based on the tree height and how much open space you need to have and how much clearance and all that kind of stuff. And we don't have a single one. So we've coined the phrase zone of last resort, as opposed to a temporary refuge area, but you still have sort of decisions to make along the way. So this is the only process flow chart that we'll be talking about tonight. It's in their document. I spend some time on it because I think it's critical. For me, this is the one that really kind of said the ahas for me in terms of if you're going to evacuate, there are things you need to know. On the upper left, situational awareness. We all know what that's about. It's heads up, it's where's the fire, which way is it going, how fast is the wind blowing, and what's the time from fire to my point. All these sorts of things create situational awareness. And did you get an evacuation notice, or is this just one of those no notice ones where, hey, heads up, the fire's here? So as you drop down, if you go straight down all the way to the bottom, the best scenario is in the green, safety zone or egress, right? You get out. You get someplace that's guaranteed safe, but like I said, we don't have any. We don't have any malls. We don't have any, schools. A lot of those types of properties, commercial locations, are what's used for safety zones. They're never a guarantee, but at least, they're accessible. We don't have it. So our best hope is, E5 egress, right? So if we can just say evacuate, go down, evacuation, egress, thumbs up, awesome. However, staying down at the bottom, you might be going down to 174 and you might not be able to make it because a tree might be down. So a TRA is the first responder technology for temporary refuge area. They're typically identified during a fire. We're going to we have pre-identified zones of last resort. They're not even as safe as a TRA, but again, that's something that we're working under the mindset that there might not be first responders, and they would be asking us, where should we go? We know our community better than they do. The other option is if you were, on your way to, again, a place that you might think is safe. For us, it's all one. So we'll talk more about it, but it could be the Hanson's Brothers Quarry, it could be Peninsula Campground, and you may have to bail out even going to one of those. So you need to be thinking about, is there a property I can pull into that is well thinned? That they have enough acreage and they've done the mastication and the tree thinning, and you might be safer there. Let's go back up to the middle of the chart, evacuation decision. I mentioned the shelter in place. This was kind of the aha for me. If you look to the left side, if you've done the pre-fire preparation to shelter in place, your survivability is in the black, which means, yes, it's yellow color, but it's in the black. It's not terrible. If you haven't done the work and you're sheltering in place, higher risk. So I found this just kind of clean, and yeah, it's complex, but knowing that it's not just a straight line from evacuation down to the egress, I found that I don't know why I was naive. I just said, that's what I'm going to do. And a lot of you have said that to me too. So I'm going to take a pause here before we proceed and just see if you guys have any thoughts or questions on all this really cool evacuation information so far. You guys can unmute yourself and
I do.
Go ahead. Say your name and what road you're on when you have questions.
This is Brad, New Deal Road. I believe everyone should plan on a blocked evacuation route to have a backup. What you're going to do.
Agreed. We'll talk more about that. In terms of the general kind of approach, have you guys thought about this notion of shelter in place or driving down UBET and having to bail out and find an alternate spot? Is that something you guys have thought about?
Well, you know my situation.
Yeah, I know. Okay, well, at any time, if you guys have a question or a comment, please feel free to just, say, Casey, I have something to add or clarify this, because I could ramble. So I'm going to jump right back in then.
Yeah, Nick Price, Old Donna Trail. Some things that I've thought about is, you mentioned it, Peninsula Campground, getting onto the lake somehow, right? I do have hiking access to the lake, which is not easy, and unless the fire is coming from the alternate direction, that's like my last resort. Like, if I can't even get off the property. But you mentioned Peninsula Campground. I'm wondering if there's been any thought on how boat access would be during a fire to Peninsula Campground to get out onto the lake where you're, safe in water. It seems more safe. Other option that I've considered a lot about, I've actually driven it out towards end of Red Dog. You can get into Cascade Shores. You get into the quarry down there. It's very, very rocky areas. Even a modest four-wheel drive vehicle can make it. Especially down into the kind of area down there. So those are the two things that I would highlight and kind of ask the group on what the thoughts are on those two options, assuming that, UBET would not be accessible.
So thanks, Nick, and glad you're on. Let's hold off on the Red Dog Cascade Shores. We're going to go to some UBET maps in a moment. But the bigger picture, you mentioned the going down to the lake. It's listed, and research shows that it is the absolute least likely for survivability. And the primary reasons for that is A, people aren't prepared. B, they stay too close to shore, and either embers and fumes or low-hanging trees get on fire, or they've been hurt, killed through that. And then C, they go out deep enough into the water, but they panic and either drown or get hypothermia. So there is a protocol for if you're going to use water as a last refuge, which I would if it was the only thing left for me too. But the recommendation is obviously stay calm And you want to take with you something to cover your head. A wool blanket is sort of the, I think, the utility knife of fire evacuation. Wool blankets come up in almost every scenario. But basically, you want to make sure that you're covering your head and your passageways, because most people in water die because of the fumes. So there's a lot of considerations there, but 100%, you would go there instead of standing there and get burned. I mean, like I said, we'll cover the alternative egress as we go into this next section. So let's talk realities. It may be beautiful here, but it is going to be very tricky to leave in a fire. And I think those of us who were here for the river fire, fortunately, it did not impact us directly. But, in my mind, when I think about leaving, I always think about going 174 to Colfax, and that was closed. So we'll take a look at that. But the other piece is that, while fires move super fast, and all of the research and all of the fires, every fire, especially the major fires, there's a lot of forensics that goes on, and fire scientists look at it. And A, people underestimate how fast the fire is moving. And then B, they wait for a warning. So that's my biggest fear for us in UBET. We know the kind of situation we're in. And so, we know that we can't wait for someone to tell us what to do. We have to be prepared to do it ourselves. And our challenges, there's going to be smoke, embers, or flames, which could impact our visibility in any of these routes we're going to talk about. We want everyone to think about driving it, at night, because driving those routes at night is the closest thing you're going to find to driving in a wildfire. Mike and I watched a video recently, one of the fires, and it was the first responders and the driver of the truck. You could hear it almost panicking, and the guy sitting in the right side is like, I got the white line, and kept the fire truck going. And the driver couldn't see where he was going, and his partner had to tell him he's still on the road. Gave me chills, but made me really think about the scenario that we might face. We all know that down trees could block UBET or any of our side roads. The fire could be there and prevent escape. Vehicle, somebody could panic. And we always talk about Peninsula Campground and our friends in the trailers, RVs, and boats that could panic and jackknife. So we have a lot of situations where we won't know until the day of what's happening with that. So we kind of need to be prepared for those things. To make matters even more challenging, all of that is exacerbated by our beautiful and rugged community. So we know these realities, we live them, we see them. There's a few of these that we do have the opportunity to positively impact, and that's why we spend so much time on clearing our parcels and thinning our trees and things of that nature. But ultimately, what all this leads to, everything combined, is that, should I stay or should I go? And then if I go, it's possible that I'm going to be trapped. So let's go back to the maps. One of the things that, I have underscored the last few years, and some of you guys have heard me say this, is, this isn't a upper UBET, lower UBET situation. This is a UBET as a whole may be blocked, and we all may be faced with the same challenges and opportunities. So again, while we hope that we'll be able to get off of 174, we may not. And this is just a kind of a bigger parcel level look to show some of the side roads. You guys have heard me talk about thinning our roads because they are our evacuation routes. But until you sort of zoom in on it, you don't realize how squiggly each line is for the roads. And, there's 80 plus of them, and many of them are our backyard egress routes. And it's complicated. And each one has its own situation with people who may or may not want you going through or allowing you going through. So, what we focus on is kind of UBET road and some of our potential primary, secondary egress routes. So let's jump right into that. Both the egress routes and zones of last resort. I can't underscore enough that as we think about these potential routes, it's which way you go. Everything is dependent upon that situational awareness, how the fire is behaving, how much time you have, and finding out where the choke points are, not just the natural ones, but I think we'll just kind of call this out. A couple of years ago, we got a micro grant from OES, and I applied it to the Fifield Mulberry intersection, which I affectionately call Big Bend. One of the early lessons I got from CAL FIRE driving around the community was that that was potentially a high risk area because fires like to go uphill. They like funnels and channels, and you've got the greenhorn funneling into Fifield, and that goes, then it burns right over Mulberry, and the whole road is blocked up and down. So that's why, I made the decision that will be where we put our grant. And, the Jarvises came in and did an amazing job masticating and cleaning it up. And yeah, fire still might go up there, but it's not going to, there's not a lot of fuel there to, keep it going. So things like that are, how we're making decisions and priorities, looking at those choke points and things of that nature, and learning about fire paths. So the potential evacuation routes, I've worked hard over the last many years, as some of you know, trying to get UBET quote on the map with the county. When I first started Firewise, we were not. We were the wild, wild west. People threw up their hands and said, we'll try to get to them. We don't know if we can. Over the years, I have done UBET tours with probably about 5 staff out of OES, the Office of Emergency Services, all the way up to the CAO, Chief Administrative Officer, Allison Lehman, who's, our county #1 exec. So my goal with that is to A, put us on the map, B, have it official in terms of what could be potential evac routes, and then C, use this information to have us included in potential grants, all the way up to including potentially having the bridge reinstalled. So for those of you who did look at the evacuation study that came out from the county a year and a half ago, we have, all of these documents, made sure it got included in that. So for them to go after grant money, all this stuff has to be in their, kind of strategic planning documents. And these are in addition to others. So let's take some time on this. When we think about, potential evac routes, none of these are a guarantee because they don't actually exist. They're sort of side roads. They're variable in terms of season, in terms of, people coming out and doing off-roading and maybe blocking them and things of that nature. But in a worst case scenario, they might be our best options. I'll start with the Steep Hollow Bridge, the yellow line in the bottom right. That was, that is probably the highest profile opportunity for us, and also going to be the longest term and most expensive. But it's definitely recognized that it's a critical potential new infrastructure, not just for UBET and our neighboring Firewise communities, but for the county. So the way I explain this to the county is that if we were able to have that bridge, and if we were able to secure access, that yellow road is Hall Road up to I-80, that becomes net new capacity for an egress route. So right now, obviously 174 to Colfax is the only sort of eastern boundary egress until you get up to Highway 20. So this would be massive for a lot of residents in our area. Secondly, I come to find out from CAL FIRE that they want the bridge there. And our current senior chief at CAL FIRE is Chief Langdon Hack, and he grew up in UBET. So he knows the area extremely well. And he wants that bridge back because last week's Lowell fire is a perfect example. The closest station to us geographically as the crow flies is in Alta, which is somewhere, up above the 80. Our actual fire station for CAL FIRE is the Nevada City one. So it's over off of Gold whatever, right? So it's almost to Nevada City. That's our closest station. And, all of this is state responsibility area. So they can't get here fast. But if he could have access to a bridge, all the fires that occur and will continue to in these, ravines, then they can get the trucks in there, cut their response time by 75%. So he actually told me that his career goal personally was to get that bridge reinstated. And I saw him earlier this week, was debriefing on the Lowell fire. And I was saying how we were going to use that as a case study to, support any grants that we might be able to get for the bridge. He let me know that he's already submitted 3 other fires this year that have occurred in this section to OES. So he's continuing to hammer our point home too. I say that because I think it's important that everyone recognize that these are long-term projects, and we had more people building these projects out. We probably could force them to do more, but that's right now it's on the vision board and nothing else has transpired with it. Okay, so that's that. Let's drop down to, let's go with Chalk Bluff. So the purple line, all the way up Chalk Bluff to 20. You guys know how many miles it is from that marker that says "You Bet Red Dog" all the way up to Highway 20? Anybody?
11.
13 something. So it's 13 something miles. It's still narrow and rutted. I know the Tonys, they kind of live at the end of our community. They've done a ton of work. There's a lot of folks up in that area who have been working on the road, but there's still sections that are very narrow. I have recently driven from 20 down a portion of it, and there's sections that are not only one lane, but obviously there's no railings or anything on the side, and it drops off like a couple thousand feet down. So back to that vision of driving through embers and smoke and not being able to see the road, I was like, I don't want to go over the edge. I don't think I had much room to margin for error. So there's that. The standard description of that is that it's, 4-wheel drive high clearance, but also, having kind of the skills and the courage to take that on. Right. And then the other piece is, if you don't and you block it and other people are behind you or trying to get through, you've just created a huge backlog, super dangerous. The pink to the left, the Greenhorn Creek, those are two that are viable and, again, variable, because we get a lot of people who, recreators who go down the Greenhorn Creek. And so while Hanson's has some contractual obligations to keeping both of those open and clear, particularly during fire season, and they do it, sometimes they'll finish something and someone will come in and say, I want to create a dam for my kids to swim. And so they'll block the road that's supposed to be open for us to drive through. So yeah, that's one of those things where I think when we talk about the radios and communication during a wildfire, we will ask people to go and verify, especially those spots, if they're passable, if they're clear and passable, and is it 4-wheel drive high clearance or is it by 2-wheel drive? Because again, we don't want people backing up, thinking that they can get there and then come to find out they can't, and then they've clogged it for those who can. So those are kind of the main areas there. And then the last one, which is it's currently a 5-year labor of love trying to get this opened. The bottom left in orange, the Sontag and Lewis Road. We don't have that open. It has been blocked by the Lewis Road Association neighbors. However, we have some great neighbors on Sontag Road who, are prepared to move the pilings, which cement pilings block that access, the straight shot out. And the reason that's so critical for us is it drops right down into the Greenhorn access road area, not to be confused with Greenhorn Road. And that Greenhorn access area does not have a ton of parcels. And so let's say that we were evacuating from, the sort of the main heart of our area, You Bet Red Dog. By the time we got down there, those folks would already have evacuated, which means that we could get out through Lewis or Greenpeace or one of those other roads in that section, and we could hit 174. So what that does for us is that allows us to evacuate people down You Bet to 174 and also siphon off some over Sontag. And if that's the case, then we have 2 ways out to 174, which is huge. So again, the plan is that, the neighbors that live there will be opening this up, and, or if they're not home, someone else can step in and do that. And we, on the radios, we'd be asking for status. There's a kind of a workaround. You have to know that area, but you can go through some private property and get around those pilings and still get out to Lewis Road and evacuate that way. But again, it's not something that is signed or common knowledge, but it's there and doable. So, depending on the scenario, if the fire's coming at us, but not on us, we would have some time to have people out there to direct traffic and things of that nature. But if we're trapped on 174 in UBET and have to go up, let's go back to Nick's kind of scenario where, you're headed down Red Dog, which is the upper pink one, and you're headed over across the Greenhorn Creek and up Nevada City through, kind of Idaho, Maryland, and Banner Mountain folks are all going to be evacuating down there. And then back out to sort of the Brunswick / 4920 area. Same thing with Hanson Brothers Quarry, which is obviously the Greenhorn Bridge. So in the center of our UBET road, I think everyone knows that. You go through the quarry, and the quarry itself, we'll talk more about it, but it's the zone of last resort. But you can cross, and this crossing is pretty well maintained. So it's a legitimate legal easement over to parcels on the Greenhorn Road side of the Greenhorn Creek. So that road is used by residents on a daily. That's kind of their access point. They don't go Greenhorn Road to their parcels. They go UBET Road, Hanson's, and into there. So from my way of thinking, that's a pretty good, a pretty good egress. But again, it would be impossible for us to think through and model all of the fire scenarios. But all of these options, it's important that we kind of have this blueprint in our mind about where they are and what the condition is and what the variables are. But until we know where that fire is and which way it's going, none of these are actionable. They're just there for us to say, okay, maybe, and then, we'd have to figure out in the moment, like, is that doable? So before I move on, I'm going to pause here and open it up to feedback, comments, and we can discuss these. We've got more to come, but let's go. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest that everyone who considers evacuation to go up Red Dog and Chuck Bluff and drive those roads out and see what they're like with your vehicle or the vehicle you plan to use. Know what it is, especially down at the creek at Greenhorn, where there's a lot of loose gravel. If you get off the compacted gravel, it's so loose. I almost got a 4-wheel drive stuck in that, and it's flat. So just be aware and go there during a non-fire scenario and see what it's like with you and your vehicle.
Yep, 100% agree.
This is Peter.
Hey, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I fully agree with whatever somebody just said about try it in your vehicle. No kidding. I went up that Chalk Bluff all the way up to 20. I could do it in 2-wheel drive in my truck, but I got a lot of clearance because it's a 4-wheel drive truck. And that would not be fun. A, in a hurry. B, with nasty visibility, and C, if there's any kind of wetness on the road. And it's steep and drops off and weird. I was going to ask a question. So I fully endorse that thing about try it out in your vehicle so you know what's there. The other thing is it fordable now at this old steep hollow bridge?
No.
It's too deep?
Well, we were just there, Mike, myself, and our fire scientist buddy, Joanne. We went out in the Pioneer side-by-side this past Sunday to try to track down the Lowell burn scar. And we spent 3 hours following in the bulldozer's tractors. So the bulldozer that got deployed on the Nevada County side and then across the river. We never made it to the burn scar. And it's not even passable by a Jeep or a regular 4-wheel drive vehicle. Mike's an excellent driver. And I was still like holding on for dear life in a couple of places.
Yeah, it would be nice to have that steep hollow bridge back.
Yeah, no, and it's overgrown. I'm shocked. I'm shocked by how overgrown it's gotten in the last few years too. I mean, we used to be able, Terry, knows this. We used to go up to that wash to Dutch Flat for the 4th of July parade on dirt bikes and ATVs and side-by-sides and made a party out of it and, had a great time. And now it's like, I don't even know if we could do that. So, so the short answer is no, it's not passable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
This is Andrew. I have a question.
Go ahead, Andrew.
So I'm looking at the map and I see where your cursor is, where the bridge is washed out.
Yep.
If you could get across that, if that bridge was fixed, then you still have to cross the Bear River, right? Is there a bridge there already?
Yeah, so the rest of that, so the next challenge, I wasn't going to go there, but yeah, so there's it's passable because this is all the Chicago powerhouse, right? So there's a lot of infrastructure there, both water and electric, and that's one of the challenges we would face is that Hall Road is locked up tighter and tight because Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 declared a lot of water sources as high risk areas for terrorism. So they don't let just anybody go through there. So there's a lot of administrative and bureaucracy that we'd have to solve for, to your point, but there are really nice roads up in some of those areas because of those infrastructures and the need to constantly access and maintain them.
But not,
Good roads, but we can't use
we
them.
can't use them.
They're not on our side of the,
Yep.
they're not on our side of the Steep Hollow or the county, right? We can't get to them. We can't get to them. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Thanks.
Someone else
no-
had a comment.
Note to self: pack a portable grinder in the go bag.
I love that.
Portable grinder to cut through chains.
The other thing mentioned here, it says Camp Ford Greenhorn Creek on that upper portion off of Red Dog. That's not currently accurate, correct?
Well, I don't
That's
know.
seasonal.
It's well, yes, and like I said, it's supposed to be passable, but we get people who go down there and mess it up all the time. So
Sure. Sure, it's not
not
a permanent reliable source yet. Understood.
Yeah, but it can and should be passable.
Yeah. One other thing that I've explored, there's another one. It's similar to what you were talking about with Red Dog. With Sontag in the red in the lower portion.
Yep.
There's another road off to the right-hand side. I don't know the name of it. I can map it out and send it to you, Kristen. But it gets very, very close to Lost Lake. So if there's a blockage at the bottom of 174, there might be some private road access to go out Lost Lake and then out towards Nevada City that way. So I can map it out and show you what I've been thinking, but there's something else there, but it is private road, private access.
So that's awesome, Nick. And yeah, definitely let me know what you have. I'll touch on Lost Lake momentarily, but that brings up a really good point. So as a lot of you guys know, my focus has been on this kind of macro level. And over the years, I've asked the neighborhood leaders to, go ahead and try to create backyard handshake agreements. And so kind of to your point, Nick, there's a lot of, in between access points. So for example, you've got Fawn Hill Drive, which cuts over to Capitol. And then from Capitol, there's a backyard gate that cuts over to Side Bet. So there's all these little interchanges and things that exist. I would love for us to start to get, a hold of those. Back in the day when I first started, I was super concerned and counseled on privacy and that people don't want that public. I flipped my point of view on that. I think we need to know at this point. I think it's imperative, in fact, that we, have access to that and we respect the privacy or the wishes of the property owners. But in an emergency, all bets are off. We go wherever, but we need to know wherever is. So to that point, there's another one next to the orange line here, the Sontag and Lewis. That particular one is Sontag Road. To the left of it is Sontag Hill. And I think Terry's on the call. Terry's property, it's on Cahill. It's a big hill. If it was snow, you would want to be sledding down it. It's not a road or a driveway, but you can sled down it, and it connects over here to Greenpeace, which also connects up here to Greenhorn Access, which connects to 174. So there are some backyard sort of handoffs that I think are super important. And I'd love to see us get those documented. I just don't have all the data.
KC,
Yes,
it's Holly. We've talked about the connector between Sontag Road and Lewis Road several times, and
for years.
we've never really pursued the county requiring that property owner to remove those cement barriers.
Yes, we have, Holly.
Oh, we have.
I have been in meetings with county, OES, roads, both board supervisors. So UBET is represented by Hardy Bullock in District 5, and then Heidi Hall for Lower UBET. They've all been part of these conversations. Rick, who is the neighborhood leader at the end of Sontag, he had put together a chronological file dating back to mid 1900s in terms of when that subdivision was built. They're basically telling us it's a civil suit. I mean, we've gone, I've not let it go. It's still out there. And more recently, when Upper UBET got annexed into the Peardale Chicago Park Fire Department, Chief Beerwagon requested a meeting with us, and myself and a handful of representatives went and had the meeting. And his angle was, he was asked by the board, how could they better serve all of UBET now that we're all in their fire department, yada, yada. I ended the meeting with, I don't want you to just support this. I want you to advocate for this opening. One of the challenges, whether this has influence or not, I don't know, it's hearsay, but one of the now retired board members from the Peardale Fire Department was a gentleman who lived on Lewis Road and part of their homeowners association and did not want that open. So my goal has been to try to figure out, collectively how to do that. The county is on it, but nobody wants to take ownership. It's literally a hot potato. So if there's new avenues, we'll figure it out. But it's been 5 years that I've been working that issue. Every time there's an opportunity for it to come up.
Okay, the other egress that we might explore is Sidebet Road to, it isn't Sidebet Road on the other side of the Little Greenhorn Creek. It's called Little Greenhorn Road. Little Greenhorn Road does go all the way up to something that connects to Greenhorn.
Yes.
Doug and I are familiar with what it was like 8 years ago, but we might be able to do a little bit of exploration on that again if you'd like us to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any potential egress route. Andrew and Marcy have been awesome in, looking at this. There's a bridge, some existence there between Mulberry and Greenhorn, and talked to Paige, who's the Greenhorn Firewise leader, and I've talked to her. Some of these things just take time. These are personalities and people's individual property, and so continue to work those. But all those I call them handshake agreements. We'd love to get those documented.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to move us forward. So the question I always get is about Red Dog Road and Chalk Bluff Road. This is a sign that we created when we were first Firewise. If you go out Red Dog right now, you'll see it with the arrow going left to Red Dog and right to Chalk Bluff. It's pretty beat up, a lot of bullet holes in it. And a lot of neighbors take extreme issue with it, because even though on the Chalk Bluff side, we say that, two-wheel drive is okay in dry conditions, the neighbors that live up there are furious and would like us to replace the sign. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that, we can't underscore enough that these aren't just, yay, let's go. To Brad's point, you got to drive them. Oh, look, I didn't realize I put in a larger, my apologies, guys. I made it bigger because I was like, how am I going to see this? Well, there we go. There's the nice big view of the same map. And this is a map, I've sent it out so many times to so many people. I don't know who has it, who doesn't. Everyone is welcome to have this. This isn't like my personal thing. I'm proud of it because we finally got literally on the map with OES, but anybody who wants to have this has access to it too. Just let me know. So when I kind of summarize the wildfire decision stay or go, this is, the chart that came through the National Institute for Technology, blah, blah, blah. This is the KC version. Know where the fire is. Evaluate your escape routes based on the location of the fire. Figure out if you have enough time to go from where you are to that escape route, or if the fire is going to intersect you. And in advance, make sure your property is prepared for sheltering in place if you have no other choice, and or you have a neighbor's house you could go to or a property you could go to. So I'm kind of on a simplistic level, and it's pretty and it's not as scary, so I like it. let's switch gears now and go back to the idea of zones of last resort. Just as background, when I first started Firewise, I had super excited with Chief Beerwagon from Paradale and Matt Wallen, Chief from Cal Fire. We all came together. We were going to turn Gary Lawton's meadow into a zone of last resort. And we deployed a lot of resources against it. You know, Beerwagon used his training hours for his spring crew. They did handline. We did a community work party. A lot of us were out there with chainsaws and clearing. We did a whole feeding of them and blah, blah, blah. Well, we got shut down from Cal Fire because of what I said earlier, that the concern is if you pre-build a zone of last resort, then people will think that they can go there instead of evacuating. In the intervening years, I've obviously learned a lot and recognized and been validated, even from all first agents, first responders, and OES, that there are a variety of scenarios where we might be trapped. So I'm flipping it on its head going forward. And what I would hope that we can focus on next year is actually identifying some of these locations and then doing the work to make them safer for fire season and safer as a zone of last resort. So where we are today, this is kind of the list of the locations. This is not exhaustive in terms of, you know, some of these, like Nick was mentioning, a water refuge and things of that nature, but actual places where you might be able to drive a vehicle to and potentially survive. And these are not rated by, you know, survivability. So there's no guarantees one way or the other, but in my opinion, I like Hanson Brothers Quarry. If the fire is not, you know, threatening it or coming through there, because you can't burn rock. So I really like rock. The Peninsula Campground, the parking lot at Rollins Lake. But when we talk about that, all the people that, you know, agencies and foresters and everyone I talk to, they instantly talk about it, but then they're like, but it's small and it's surrounded by hill. And really, even though NID does a great job with cleaning it up every year, there's a lot of trees. And it's not a big parking lot, and size matters when it comes to, you know, safety zones. The shoreline, you know, this is kind of what you were talking about, Nick, you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. You know, there's potentially hills that might block the fire depending on which way it's coming, and you might jump in the water and that hill might block the radiant heat and you might just be fine. Greenhorn Campground, I'm actually kind of excited about this. So prior to our shelter in place, I went over and met the operations manager there and asked him, you know, his thoughts around us. Like if we were able to get out, you know, Sontag and Sontag Hill and get down to Lewis and to Greenhorn access, you know, what if 174 is blocked there too? And basically, bottom line is he's all, bring it. You guys, anytime you want to get to, you know, the Greenhorn Campground, which is big and cleared, it's open. There's going to be wind-driven, you know, embers and some scary stuff there, but not a lot of fuels on the ground. He's like, yeah, if you guys ever need to, come on over. Furthermore, his assistant is Gal Regina. She's retired out of Cal Fire, and she's the assistant there. And she signed up in our UBET mailing list and said, anything I can do to help, I'm in. She was on the Tubbs Fire, the Car Fire, the Paradise Fire. She's one hardcore, you know, get her done firefighting gal. And so I'm like, okay, I might call on you. But the bottom line is that's a new zone of last resort for us. And I think it's got some real merit under the right circumstances. The other thing that comes up quite a bit is, you know, we've got a lot of, you bet, and, you know, Red Dog, right? The old mining towns. There's a lot of diggings and tailings and stuff like that. Those are pretty bare. If you go to Google Maps and just look at them, you'll see there's a lot of areas that have very limited vegetation. So that's good. So, you know, if you have to drive somewhere in desperation, drive to where there's no vegetation with all of your, you know, preparedness and kits and all that kind of stuff. Last scares me, but open meadows. And I really think this is more of a target for next year. So, you know, even at 174 and UBET, that huge meadow, you know, Red Barn's for sale, that area, but they've never done anything with the light flashy fuels. So part of this whole idea of looking at these areas is to understand that if the fire is coming, that will cause a ton of heat. But if the fire's already gone through there and you drive there and you see it's blackened, that's a pretty good place to be. There's other open areas throughout UBET. I don't know where they all are, but same kind of scenario applies to that. Any thoughts or questions on this before I go on?
Yeah, this is Alice Hale Price. I was wondering if anybody's ever had any success using the PG&E power line road to get down to Greenhorn, especially with that note on Greenhorn Campground being willing to have us.
I don't think, okay, so the question is, can you get there from the power lines? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, yeah, or like I can see that there's sort of 4x4 routes, it seems like, through the power lines. And I don't know if you can get all the way down
That's a
to a
great
place.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad I hadn't really thought of it that way. I know that they have some gates, but let's see if anyone here has an answer to that. Does anyone know?
I think I guess that's just another place as far as sort of last resorts that is cleared area, but it's obviously very wooded on both sides. And one note, just as far as the short term until the dam gets fixed, that down in where Bear River is coming into the lake is completely dry or pretty close to it. So at least in the short term, that is a good I think zone of last resort for having an area where you're not actually in water, but it is away from trees.
Yeah, no, great points. Let me touch on the power lines thing, because someone early on when I was doing this said to me, oh, it might go to the power lines and blah, blah, blah. So I brought that up to, I call it my team, all my mentors. One thing they called out as a really severe watch out with the power lines is if they're arcing, and if the power lines are down in any place, you're going to get, you could get electrocuted. So yes, and right. So again, it's one of those, is it open? Is it available? I love your notion. I love this idea, Alice, of potentially just zipping down there to Greenhorn access. I'm going to look at that as a map, because that sounds really intriguing to me. So let's go ahead.
I guess it might also just be something that we could lean on PG&E to like try to help us get that access.
Yeah, I think it's worth exploring. And the other piece is that leads to is, have they deactivated the energy and the power, right? So if they have, and or, and we could keep an eye on that. I don't have that on my list at all. So thank you. It's not on my radar. So thank you for bringing that up. I think that's super cool. The other piece where Rollins Lake is low, yes, we have to look for vegetation areas, but we also have to be, again, situational awareness. Where's the fire? And is the Bear, River acting as a funnel point? Is it going to be drawn up there? And then in which case you don't want to go there, or is it someplace else? And that becomes an option. So that's why it's super important to have, kind of like I said, the blueprint in your mind of all of these options. And then once you know where the fire is and where it's going, you can apply those things. And the radios will be, this is a situation where everyone who has a radio, if you go there and you are the first one there, you get on the radio and say, I'm at the mouth of the Bear River in Rollins, and the wind is going crossways and it's not going up, up the channel, up river. So it's cool right here now, so it's going to be all about communication. I touched on the Hansen Brothers Quarry, but from a zone of last resort perspective, I think it's important that everyone is aware that those gates on the main, the Mule Canyon side of the bridge, when we first cross the bridge and make that left, there's the Hansen's access road to the quarry itself. There are gates up there, and they are typically locked. During a wildfire, any authorized agent can open them, and that could be Hansen's, Pairdale, CAL FIRE, Nevada County Sheriff, etc. There are staff Hansen's has on staff that live there and potentially could be there. So just understand that that's a checkpoint, right? So as we move through that process, we don't just all go there. We first check, is it accessible? They have also said in the past that if a fire is happening, because they have gates between Red Dog and the quarry. So, as a standard rule, you have to go up Ubet, Red Dog, down Red Dog to that over Nevada City. But if possible, they could open the gates that close that off on the Greenhorn itself. So all of that is, feels like maybe, but potentially, and thank God we have radios to communicate. I'm gonna go ahead.
Andrew.
Yeah.
So when Marcy and I drove through the quarry the other day,
Yeah.
looking for Red Dog on the right and on the left, we actually didn't find it. And it might have been, there was a dirt road earlier on, and I thought that was Greenhorn, but nothing's marked there. So it wasn't easy to, well, we never found it actually. Now, if we had gone up Ubet all the way to Red Dog and came down into the quarry and then drove across the quarry, then we would have probably seen it. But we didn't see it on the right or the left. So we just drove in and kept driving till we got to a gate, turned around and went back out.
Yeah, so you guys went up to the quarry, which is here, past
Yeah.
Greenhorn, where you go to Greenhorn Road, and you drove up a ways, you hit a gate, you turn around and came back. To get to the Red Dog crossing, you have to go Red Dog to
Yeah,
way
right.
up here. So there's a gate that is in here, and that's the gate that they're saying that during a wildfire, they may try to open.
That must be the gate we came to.
Yeah, so I can't, I can't give guarantees on this. I'm just putting information out there, but hoping that, we'll have communication systems to know that it is or is not accessible. I wanted to step back because kind of at a macro level, one of the key things to think about when it's time to evacuate or we're in evacuation, whether it's on top of us or coming toward us, is the evacuation zones. And Ubet is roughly speaking, our community is roughly speaking in this blue outline here. And then the yellow are the three major arteries. So the first one we have obviously is 49 up to, I didn't go south on 49, 49 to 20, out 20 toward Yuba, Marysville and Yuba City, and then 174 to Colfax. We could have a yellow line down 49 as well. But I think for all of us intuitively, we know this, but those are the main population centers in Nevada County. I don't know about anybody else, but that's not where I want to go. And Terry, who's on the call tonight, was also in our shelter in place call, and he made he told the story about evacuating during the river fire and early, good man, early evac, and he went south on 49, and it was so backed up, he turned around and went north. So again, even in the moment, not having a fire on top of you, you might be making plan A, plan B, plan C. Doing a little bit of a deep dive on that, the call out that I wanted to make was the evacuation zones themselves. And UBET has 5 that are highlighted in yellow. So, we all don't share the same evacuation zone. So let's say this is a larger wildfire and it's approaching us. Be careful or asking, people, are you evacuating, and recognizing they might not be in your same zone. So, I look at kind of entry to UBET off of 174. You guys are all sort of in the same area, but if you talk about Chalk Bluff, if you talk about Chalk Bluff, they're in a completely different kind of environment. So we can't rely necessarily on what other people are saying impacting us. The ones in pink are our neighboring evacuation zones. And a best practice for when you monitor, if you've got code red and you're under a warning, is to look at where the fire is, which way it's coming. And as you see the zones sequentially getting closer to you, just assume that you're going to be under mandatory and, start thinking about pulling out, even though you're under a warning. Especially with the pace that fires are moving these days, there's a lot less time than there used to be. But again, so these evacuation sort of zones, if you will, it's a critical thing to recognize and know, because it will impact our decision making. I think that you brought up, Nick, Lost Lake Road, and I don't know if everyone's aware. I did communicate with all the Lost Lake residents. The Greenhorn Road Firewise community has spent a couple of years focused on Lost Lake Road And they just concluded last week or the week before a road improvement project, which was mostly funded by them, doing a GoFundMe or raising monies from their residents, because that Lost Lake Road is critical to them as the alternate evac route. And I'm going to show you a map because I took the time to build this because I don't think people get it. I didn't get it. So the green is Greenhorn Road. Bet you guys wonder how I picked green for that. So on the far left is Brunswick, where Greenhorn goes in, and Greenhorn actually dead ends right at the Hanson Brothers Quarry. So that's, kind of the direction it goes. And the last part of their road is just treacherous. So all those folks will probably come Hanson's to UBET to evacuate. UBET is the blue line at the bottom. So you can see where at the very tippy bottom of this map, it connects to 174. So go back up to the top, the red arrow, Lost Lake comes in at Greenhorn, not quite the middle of their road in their community, but close enough, right? So it's in the middle. So you can see where to them, Lost Lake becomes a critical evacuation or alternate route. It drops down yellow all the way. And where does it come in at? It comes in right at the juncture, right before UBET Road hits 174. So what does that mean? Somebody tell me what that means.
It's an alternate. It's an alternate to 174. If 174 is blocked, you can get to Nevada City through Lost Lake.
Impossible log jam.
Yeah, both are true. Both are true. So I'm not a fan of Greenhorn Road. They're probably, in terms of safety, depending on the situation, we potentially could go that way. But I think the odds are, yes, it might be usable by UBET, but more importantly, it is going to be usable by them. And Katie nailed it. If they siphon off people here and we have a 2.5 mile backup, which is what the modeling shows from UBET trying to get off of UBET at 174, and we've got half of Greenhorn coming over here, we are FUCKED. And just so you guys know, like, I know about this, and I'm always going to take the bigger view and say, absolutely, we want to encourage egress routes and backyard handshakes and open them up wherever we can. But the impact that this potentially could have is significant. And if I go way back to, I don't know if it was here. Nope. Back up. If I go way back to the days when we sat around with Banner Mountain and UBET and we had conversations. So we border Greenhorn and then Banner, we all share the ridge up to Cascade Shores. Banner has actually listed their one, like we're looking at all of our desperation routes. One of their desperation routes brings them to the top of Red Dog. So Banner could come over here and come out Red Dog. So unlikely, yes. Possible, yeah. So, these are other factors that potentially could fit into it. Andrew, I just muted you, just so you know. So that's just another piece of information that when we start talking about evacuation and things that could be happening, things to be, the watch outs. I wanted to switch gears to trapped in vehicle because that is obviously one of the most dangerous and low survivability things. But before I do that, any other questions on any of that?
Yeah, Casey, Katie Abbott on Abbott Hill, Fawn Hill. Question: will there be like traffic cops out there, or a radio channel that will be communicating between Banner, Greenhorn, and us, and I guess Dalmatian, of traffic routes? Like when we get to 174, how do we know? Do we go left or right? Like traffic information besides evacuation routes.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The sheriff's office liaison between Office of Emergency Services and the sheriff's office is responsible for evacuation and all of that. And the best answer I've gotten is we're going to try. I think the reality that we've been learning the last 2 to 3 years is there's not enough resources to go around. So it's quite likely that, residents are going to be the ones directing that traffic. Have we talked about it? No. Do I know that it's a reality? Yeah. So that's just something that's, we're going to play out, and hopefully someone will step into the fray and go, okay, this is the reality. And and alternate cars, from different sources. And the how do we know thing, a lot of that is based on the type of fire it is and where it is. If it's in our community, we know what to do. If it's behind us, we're gonna go, we're gonna go left to Colfax. That's our first option. If that's blocked because it's at Orchard Springs or something like that, then we're gonna go right. So the only thing I can tell you is the radios are going to be key for helping us make those decisions in the moment. And we'll be relying on, even during the river fire, Rose was from Peninsula and she was leaving and I go, let me know how UBET is. Let me know how UBET is, so she got on the radio. Wasn't the river fire, it was a different fire, but she's like, UBET's clear, UBET's clear. So we're going to have to make those, work together to communicate the status of each option. But the traffic situation terrifies me. And, the fact that like Terry tried to go down 49 and had to turn around and go back, and his other comment was life goes on. Those people over there weren't racing away from the fire. They were going shopping and picking up their kids from school and the fire wasn't close to them. So nobody said everybody shelter in place so that the people who are entrapped can get out.
Wow.
So a lot of that stuff.
And you,
Right, so I'm going back to the trapped in your vehicle scenario, because this is something that the more that I've, read documents and sort of understood, what the options are, I think it's critical that we understand that we have ways to prepare for this and when we do it. So either being trapped because we are like trees fall down and we're stuck, or we can't, even if it's a zone of last resort, to me, that's considered trapped in your vehicle. So at all times, you kind of want to be prepared for that. The fact is that vehicles can ignite, from radiant heat. So the further away from any kind of vegetation and fuels you are, the better off you will be. There's definitely scenarios where people have been in their vehicle thinking that they're going to be safe, and the vehicle catches on fire and they're forced to jump out and run. So I hope to God that none of us ever face that scenario, but back to the wool blanket and some other supplies, we look at that. But in terms of being in the vehicle, I'm creating this as a flyer. I don't know if it's perfect or I'll change it, but my goal is that everybody prints this out and puts it in their glove box. So anybody who's in a vehicle in a moment of panic can say, okay, first and foremost, find a safe area. Second, position yourself outward with the vehicle facing out in case you can escape or need to. So don't block yourself in. The recommendation is turn off the engine, keep the headlights on in case there are first responders or other people who could see you, because visibility will be bad. Keep your doors unlocked. So you do need to make a run for it. You can. Secure the windows and vents. You want to make sure that you turn off your air conditioning because your engine's off anyway, and you close those outside vents. That's one of the number one things that was recommended. You don't want to invite smoke to come on in. They use blankets. It's not just the wool blanket, but you want to lay on the floor because smoke rises. And so you have a better chance of having better air. I'm creating my trapped in my vehicle kit. And I've become very blanket happy. I've become very welding blanket happy. Amazon Prime was very happy I was their customer a couple of weeks ago. Some of the supplies that I packed, but at minimum, a wool blanket. And obviously, OES does a great job of communicating about, plan your 5 people outside of the area. Make sure that you do communicate with someone that, drop a pin, right? It's not just saying, hey, I'm sheltering in place or I'm in a car, but drop the freaking pin. Mike and I travel a lot on WhatsApp. I'm always sharing my location. Just someone needs to know where you are. And then again, the low, especially if you do have to bolt out of your vehicle, find a place where you can get low, hide behind the rocks, the rocks between you and the fire, a hillside, anything that could help you. And then the low, staying low helps with the air passages and the blankets and stuff over you.
KC?
Yeah. Yes, Andrew.
any particular wool blanket? I mean, is it a certain kind or just any wool
Yeah.
blanket?
No, there are certain kinds, and thank you for asking that, because apparently a lot of companies advertise a wool blanket, but they're not 100% wool. So they're 60 or 80% wool. So it has to be 100% wool because the synthetics will melt in the heat, even if it's not direct, and burn you bad. And the second thing is heavy. The heavier the weight, the better off it is. So my thin little lap blanket for, on the couch while watching TV, not so much. So kind of military, heavy blankets, thicker gauge, and 100% wool.
What about soaking it in water? Before, if you have time.
Yeah, some things I've read say yes, some things are no, depends on the scenario. Especially when you're in the water refuge, if you're in the lake, they say yes. And that wool blanket that's over your head, you want to have that wet and then breathe through that. I can't answer it more specifically than that, but I just know that sometimes they say, yeah, wet. I know, like if you're in your house, sheltering in place, wet towels under the doors, under the garage, not dry towels, wet towels, so the embers can't come under. So there's scenarios like that, but I don't have a really good answer for you, Katie.
I want to mention something just to be aware of. I don't know who told me this, but when we're under extreme heat, it sounds practical being in the lake and the water, but water turns to steam, and the
Yep.
water can be extremely hot, also become extremely hot. So maybe a
Third
dry
degree, yeah.
blanket in a dry area would be better than a wet blanket in a dry area. But I don't know, but know that
Yeah.
it's going to turn to steam that can be very hot.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I don't know either. I can try to find out. I'm sure some of my mentors have answers for that, but you do bring up the water thing, and we're talking about rehearsal now. And one of those rehearsals is building your kit and having a lot of water constantly. You need like a cup of water, every, I don't know how often it is, every 20 minutes, because it's hot and you're going to get dehydrated. So I did buy one of those 2.5 gallon BPA, blah, blah, blah things to keep in the vehicle, just to make sure I always have water on hand. But yeah, so there, yeah, I'll find out, Katie. I'll ask somebody about the wet blanket or dry blanket. So let's talk about kind of overall actions. I said it before, prep like you mean it. We've been doing the work. Defensible space, home hardening is the most important for embers. But your driveway and your road, if they don't have clearance, you may not even be able to get off your road in a wildfire if you guys haven't cleared it, 30 to 75 feet defensible space, not clear cut. So we've been promoting that for a couple of years, but here's your actions. Create go bags, all of them. And I'll show in a moment that Anathy and I are going to do a UBET pop-up, our first Firewise pop-up in the UBET community. It's going to be around go bags. It's been mentioned by a lot of us, drive the roads. On Sunday nights when we do the radio thing, probably about 3 months ago, I started talking to everyone and having everyone pull up their Google Maps. And I changed the roll call list to be sections starting from 174 up, so that people could become familiar not only with the roads and where people are, but in a panic wildfire situation. If Katie says Katie Abbott Hill Road, if Holly says Sherbet off side bet, people instantly know where that is because the information is coming from that location. And so it's critical that we understand where these roads are and who is speaking to that. And that's that personal responsibility. So it's not just driving the roads, it's knowing the roads. And like I said, we've got 80 plus roads. You may not know all of them, but there's 30, I think 32 or so plus or minus that intersect, you bet. At least know those, right? So that's the key thing. I am a huge fan of visualization. That was something that served me really well in sports my whole life, but we can apply it to anything. And take some time, look at the videos, Google stuff, right? So ask questions and see what it looks like, and get mentally prepared, right? So then it's not as terrifying. You'll know, oh, I won't be able to see this, and the passenger is going to have to help you make sure you stay on the road. Last but not least, drill baby drill. Brad and I have been working on setting up some radio drills and kind of deployment drills with first responders and all this kind of stuff. And we haven't quite gotten there yet. But that's something that you guys can do independently. And I really appreciate Andrew, Marcy, you guys listening to that and getting out there and finding out what works. And it's okay that you couldn't find it. It's like, that's exactly what you want to be doing. So kudos to you guys for doing that. Andrew, I'm going to mute you again. Next up, since I'm doing these Zooms, you know, for me, it's super time efficient. And also, like I said earlier at the opening, you know, the ability to record and then share out. You know, we got quite a few views on the shelter in place one. A lot of people who couldn't attend. So super important, I think, that, you know, we try to, I'm trying to find ways to share information, and this is just one of my new ways, but already have started down the path of the next one will be on personal protective equipment, PPE. I get tons of questions, and I appreciate the questions because it forces me to do research and come up with answers. So we're going to do a deep dive. It'll be a shorter, you know, shorter call, I'm sure, but we're going to cover, you know, what kind of, you know, not just, oh, wear boots or wear this. I'm actually, you know, coming up with a hit list on what are the good, better, best for respirators. You know, what are the different aspects of, you know, what it might be, masks and so forth. And so we'll have a hit list put together and share that out. The other one that I think is critical is, you know, we talk about, we can't make these decisions until we know where the fire is and where it's coming from. So I want to do a deep dive on that situational awareness. There's a ton of tools that exist, both for monitoring fires, whether it's our sensors or something else. And, you know, what that each tool tells us, and make sure that everyone's got them set up the right way. And that includes the alert systems from the county and from CAL FIRE as well. So Code Red, Genesis, all of that good stuff. So there'll be a deep dive on that. The third one, not related to evacuation, but Anthea is working to get a session set up with NRCS because they are a potential funder for clearing property and clearing land. So she's working to get a speaker from there. And then I want your guys' ideas, right? So this has become something that I think is really important for us to come together and share information. And so if you have other thoughts and things that you'd like to see, whether now or in the winter time, you know, please feel free to send those my way. And as I mentioned before, I'm super excited. Our Go Bag pop-up, I posted this out on Facebook yesterday. Anthea and I are going to put together a table. I think that some of you know that I've basically broken down go bags into 5. So you have your personal one, your pet one, your vehicle go bag, your shelter in place, and your stay and defend. I started getting confused personally, and I'm like, I need, you know, I don't know where anything is anymore because it's all in just one big hot mess. So now I've sort of reorganized them, and I came up with an infographic that's on the upper left, which I'll be sharing out. And then I'm working toward checklists that go behind each one of them with items that, you know, kind of compiled from a variety of sources. But we're going to do that at the Friday social, not tomorrow, but next week. So August 1st. And I hope some of you guys come out. I can guarantee you that what you see in my trapped in your car vehicle go bag, you'll be like, oh my gosh, right? So I never thought of myself as a prepper, but maybe I am. It's not a doomsday prep, it's a wildfire prep. But my mama always told me, you know, better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I'm going to share out what's in our go bags. Last but not least on this, you know, follow the UBET Firewise channel because I'm going to start posting other things up there too, videos of interest that may not be community Zooms. And as I do that, you'll get notified there. And on Facebook, I've had a UBET Firewise page for a long time, but I just, you know, never really worked at promoting it. But I'm trying not to overwhelm the UBET community page, the Facebook page all the time, but there's a lot of information that I can drip in, and I'm going to just start continuing to do that on the Firewise page. So like and follow so that I know that you're already getting the information. All right, same disclaimer as we opened with. Evacuate early, evacuate often if you can. You guys have heard this from me the last few months. Hope for the best. Plan for the worst. And plan doesn't mean plan, it means prepare. And hope is not a strategy. So with that said, I'm going to open it up for any further comments, questions, dialogue, anything. Take yourselves off mute. Feedback.
Casey, will these slides be available?
Yeah, so this is being recorded right now.
Right.
So the whole Zoom thing will be there, and then I can make slides available to you. I can't send in the whole thing because it's too big. So either just tell me what you want, or I could PDF it and get it off to you.
Okay.
But this is going to go up on the YouTube channel, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Awesome.
I know, I was so happy that people texted me like, can you please record it? I said, I'm really going to try. The first one, I've attended so many hundreds of Zoom meetings that this is my first couple months trying to host them. So I'm not that good at it. Alice, Nick, what do you guys think?
I thought it was great. I couldn't tell that it was your first Zoom meeting.
It's my third.
Okay, great.
The first one I forgot to record, and so we had to redo it.
I dropped a just link in the chat to something I'm probably gonna get and put in my go bag. I don't have a large wool blanket, but I think the fire suppression blanket, maybe see if I can get one that's a little bit bigger, but that one's 6 feet by 4 feet. And it's not very expensive. So I don't know. It maybe is not as good for smoke. Maybe there's benefits on the wool for smoke versus just embers and fire protection, but something to consider.
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, that point is exactly why I've decided we're going to have a whole call on it, because, you know, I have a wool blanket, then I got welding blankets, and then I got these fire cloaks. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, we need to consolidate this into a deep conversation. And people have asked about boots. I'm like, I don't know, the firemen wear these, but you know, so it's kind of all over the place. One of the main things that everyone asks about and I'm concerned about is respirators and oxygen. And so I've actually got a chart that I'm pulling together for good, better, best. You know, obviously a bandana is better than nothing, right? So my go bags had multiple bandanas for years, and I feel like I'm an N95 junkie. I've got enough to hand out to all of you. But, you know, then I really want the more robust ones too. So we're going to go over all of that in some level of detail.
You know, Casey, the other thing that I'm curious, because of course I'm not a wildfire expert at all, but how fast do they actually move through? I mean, I know, you know, there's the pre-paradise and post-paradise consciousness, you know, and so since paradise, it's just been kind of, you know, being on red alert, living on red alert ever since then. But, you know, like shelter in place is probably your best bet.
The wind.
If it's right here.
Well, it depends.
I know it all depends.
That's why it's impossible to answer that question.
I know.
On a global basis, you can answer for a specific fire in a specific scenario, but you can't just generally answer it. So that's why I always say, be prepared for every scenario. So for me, Mike and I are preparing to stay and defend, but we're ready to go. But by preparing for the worst case scenario, the fire being on top of us, we then have that option. Although this report, this 169-page report, they talk about where people wait too late if they want to shelter in place or stay and defend, and then they say they can't. If you don't have a hidey hole or a backup plan or an escape route to protect yourself, then you need to make decisions earlier. So this is, you know, tonight was really kind of an overview. It gets really complex and granular.
Oh, I know. And you have to have experience to be able to know what the heck. I mean, I was thinking, like even a firefighter, I've heard where they just lay down on the ground and they cover themselves with the blanket.
That's what I said. I said, go to the low area, cover yourself with your wool blanket, and make sure that your air passage is protected through either your masks or the blanket, but keep it in the low area.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, but the fire shelters that the firefighters have, it's mandatory part of their PPE equipment, right? If they get caught in a burnover, there's a lot of instances where these fires are more intense than they've ever been, and they can't survive that, even with the fire shelter. The fire shelters are not survivable in 100% of scenarios.
Well, we need one for the car too, right?
Andrew, I'm going to mute you again. I can hear Marcy again. Glenn, I know you're on. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, considering your background, if you wouldn't mind just giving me your observations,
Be bright and easy to find.
if you're willing. Glenn, Cherry, maybe not. Okay.
What would you like to know?
I want to know your feedback on everything I shared.
So like the wool blankets, I would not use a wet one in an enclosed space. Like in a vehicle, I wouldn't use one because of the steam. Outside, you're probably fine if you're underneath it because the steam's going to rise. As far as the masks go, I think N95s are great. They work very, very well. If you're putting more on top of that, it gets very hard to breathe through. Bandanas don't work very well at all. It's better than nothing, but you're still going to choke on the smoke.
Yep.
Power lines, stay away from. But if you're evacuating the area and the fire hasn't hit them yet, they're probably safe. As far as fire rate of spread, they can go hundreds of feet in seconds when it's a crown fire. If it's ground fire, it could be a very slow rate moving. But if it's in a meadow, it could be extremely fast. So every fire is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different.
We'll wait on those.
What else do you want to know?
Thank you. That's awesome. And I just, your background, your experience. I mean, I'm doing it more like academically. You're doing it more real world. So I really appreciate you sharing. Anybody else have any things they want to talk about? Comments, questions, sharing?
I'd like to make a comment. Glenn, thank you for sharing that. And I think this is the type of information that would be really powerful to know, is people that have been hanging out in fires and know this is that, steam rises, good in the car, not good in the car, good outside. Crown fires go fast, meadows go fast, ground doesn't, I mean, just having people that live in fire be able to share their wisdom, I think would be awesome too.
Yep.
So thank you, Glenn, for that.
You're welcome.
Agree. Well, on that note, anybody go ahead.
This is Juan from All Immigrant Trail.
Yes, Juan.
I just want to thank you for doing this, and I want to say I've been in a real forest fire, the 1988 49 fire, and I can tell you none of us were prepared at all. It was total chaos, and it overwhelmed all the emergency agencies, so you were totally on your own. Roads were blocked, and none of us knew what to do. And so these conversations to have ideas on how to handle things, I know that from 1988 till now, I definitely feel a lot more prepared to deal with situations. I understand fires a little bit better, although they are different, like Glenn said. And understanding some of the dynamics to be is critical. Also, when if you're trying to evacuate or move away from a fire, the fuel loads on your way out are important because you don't want to stop on a dense vegetation area. If you're going to stop because you have to, look for non-dense areas where the fuel loads are not as high. So I really, wish we could get all the help we could get, but more likely than not, if there's a ginormous fire generating its own wind, and that we're going to be on our own here. And so knowing what to do to me is critical.
Thank you, Juan. Agree completely, and appreciate your experience and you sharing it as always. Yeah, I mean, take the steps, do the work, and, make good decisions. We're in this together. All right, guys. I think I've gone over on my time, but super important discussion. Really appreciate everyone joining in. And like I said, Anathea's right. These are conversations where anybody who's got expertise, I'm doing the best I can. I'm a marketer and a business girl, and this is me learning 7 years worth of information and not a career and not fully experienced. So please, take everything I say with a grain of salt unless Glenn says it's okay. All right. I bid you all a good night and hope that this is not overwhelming. I'm available for questions or comments or one-on-one chats on anything related to this at any time. Love you guys. Stay
Thank you,
safe.
Casey, for doing
Thank you,
this.
Casey. Thank
Thank
you.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.